In late March 2024, a software engineer named Andres Freund was benchmarking a database. That's the whole setup. He works on PostgreSQL. He was running micro benchmarks, and micro benchmarks are noisy, so he wanted the machine quiet, with nothing else consuming CPU. And something was. The SSH daemon was using a surprising amount of processor time, which was odd because those SSH connections were the usual background noise of the internet, automated bots trying random usernames and passwords, and they were all failing. A failed login shouldn't be expensive. He also noticed his own SSH logins were taking about 500 milliseconds longer than they should. Half a second. Roughly the difference between a login taking a tenth of a second and taking 6/10. Nobody would notice that. He noticed it because he was specifically hunting for noise. He profiled the SSH daemon and found it was spending a lot of time inside a compression library called libelzma, which has nothing to do with authentication. And the profiler couldn't attribute that time to any named function, which is itself strange. Then he remembered that a few weeks earlier, automated testing of PostgreSQL had thrown an odd memory error after a package update. He'd noted it and moved on. He put those together and spent several hours pulling the thread. What he found and disclosed on the 29th of March was a backdoor in xz-utils, a compression tool installed on essentially every Linux system in the world. It was assigned CVE-2024-3094 and scored 10.0, the maximum. It gave anyone holding a particular private key the ability to execute code remotely on affected machines before authentication. It had been introduced weeks earlier, and it was on a trajectory to reach the stable releases of major Linux distributions, which is to say, a very large fraction of the servers running the internet. Now, that story usually gets told as a thriller. Lone engineer spots anomaly, saves the internet, roll credits. The version I want to give you is less comfortable because when you look at how the attack was built, something becomes clear. Every deliberate defense was anticipated and neutralized. The thing that caught it was an accident. Let me take that apart. What was at risk? First, why a compression library matters. xz-utils is unglamorous infrastructure. It compresses and decompresses files. It's been around since 2009, and it ends up installed nearly everywhere because other things depend on it. The critical part is a chain of dependencies. The library it ships, libelzma, is pulled in by systemed, the system and service manager on most modern Linux distributions. And on Debian and Fedora, SSHD, the SSH server, is patched to link against systemed. So libelzma ends up loaded inside the memory of the SSH daemon, the process that accepts remote logins, which means anyone who can put code inside libelzma can put code inside the thing guarding remote access to the machine. Not attack it from outside, run inside it. That's the prize. And it's a good illustration of how software supply chains actually work. Nobody chose to make SSH depend on a compression library. It accumulated through a chain of individually reasonable decisions. The human attack. The technical part came last. The attack began with a person. Since around 2009, XZ has been maintained principally by one man, Lasse Collin, a volunteer. That's the standard condition for this kind of software. Enormous downstream reach. One person's spare time. In late 2021, an account under the name Giatan began contributing. The patches were legitimate and useful. Over roughly 2 years, the account built a real commit history, several hundred commits, engaged constructively, and was gradually trusted. Alongside that, other accounts appeared. Names like Jigar Kumar and Dennis Entz, with little history elsewhere, filed complaints and feature requests, and pressed Collin about slow progress, pushing for the project to get another maintainer. And Collin, in a public mailing list exchange in 2022, wrote something that is genuinely hard to read now. Responding to that pressure, he mentioned that Jia Tan might have a bigger role in the project in the future, that he'd been helping a lot off list and was practically a co-maintainer already. Elsewhere in those exchanges, Colin referred to long-term mental health issues limiting what he could take on. So the shape of it, an unpaid volunteer maintaining critical infrastructure under manufactured pressure from accounts complaining he wasn't doing enough, being offered relief by a helpful contributor who had spent 2 years earning that offer. He accepted the help. Almost anyone would have. I want to be careful here, because this part gets told badly. Colin did nothing wrong. He was targeted by a sustained operation, using the ordinary mechanisms of open source collaboration in a situation where the alternative, refusing all help forever, isn't a functioning way to maintain software. I'll also follow the norm the security community adopted at the time and not speculate about who was behind it. That's a question for investigators, and guessing publicly adds nothing. The technical attack. Where the code wasn't now the mechanism, and this is the part that matters most. Open source software has a review model. Anyone can read the source. That's the security argument. Many eyes, public scrutiny, nothing hidden. But there's a gap in it, and the attack was built precisely inside that gap. The code you read is not always the code you build. Most projects distribute in two forms. There's the Git repository, which is what people browse, review, and comment on. And there's the release tarball, an archive prepared by the maintainer, which is what distributions actually download and compile. They're supposed to be equivalent. In practice, the tarball contains generated files, build scripts produced by tooling, configuration machinery, things that aren't kept in version control because they're derived rather than written. Almost nobody reads those. They're machine-generated boilerplate. So here's how it was arranged. The payload was placed in the xz-utils repository, but disguised as binary test data. Compression libraries legitimately need corrupted and malformed files to test their error handling, so a repository full of deliberately broken archives is completely normal. Two of those files contained the backdoor, obfuscated. The trigger, the thing that would extract and activate that payload during compilation, was a modified build script, and it existed only in the release tarballs, not in Git. And in February 2024, the relevant file name was added to the project's .gitignore, which helps ensure it never appeared there. That's the whole trick. Raid the repository and you find some odd-looking test files that any compression project would have. Read the tarball's build machinery and you'd find the activation. But nobody reads that. The result is that the artifact everybody inspected was clean, and the artifact everybody installed was not. Turning off the alarms. And there's more, which is what convinces me this was patient rather than clever. Fuzzing. Google runs a service called OSS-Fuzz that automatically throws malformed input at open source projects to find crashes and memory errors. It covers xz. In July 2023, a pull request was submitted that disabled fuzzing of a specific mechanism, the one the backdoor would later rely on. Sandboxing. Linux has a feature called landlock that restricts what a process can do, limiting damage if something is compromised. In February 2024, a commit modified the check that detects whether landlock is available by introducing a single stray character into a small test program. The program then failed to compile, so the build system concluded landlock wasn't supported and quietly disabled it. One character, a dot, and a security mitigation switches itself off in a way that looks exactly like an ordinary compatibility problem. And the push downstream, once the compromised versions were released, accounts with minimal history began filing requests asking distributions to package the new version quickly. So, the code review was aimed at xz-utils, and the trigger wasn't in Git. The fuzzing was aimed at that mechanism, and the fuzzing was disabled. The sandbox was aimed at limiting damage, and the sandbox was switched off by a typo that wasn't a typo. The trust model assumed contributors are what they appear, and the attack was 2 years of appearing trustworthy. Every single defense was accounted for. What actually caught it? And then a database developer wanted a quiet machine. The backdoor's flaw wasn't conceptual, it was that doing extra cryptographic work inside the SSH daemon costs measurable time, around half a second, and burns CPU even on connections that fail. That's not a security symptom. No monitoring system flags, logins are slightly slower. It's a performance symptom, and it was noticed by someone whose job that week was noticing performance symptoms on a development version of Debian, who happened to also remember an unrelated memory warning from weeks earlier, and who had the specific skills to profile a daemon and interpret what he saw. The compromised versions never reached the stable releases of the major distributions. The window between release and discovery was a matter of weeks. It's not listed as a known exploited vulnerability because, as far as anyone can tell, it was caught before it was used. That outcome is genuinely good. What's unsettling is the mechanism that produced it. What I take from this 3 things, and none of them is open source, is insecure. First, the review model has a specific and fixable blind spot. Anyone can read the source is true, and it wasn't sufficient because the thing being read and the thing being shipped had drifted apart. That gap is now taken seriously. Comparing a released tarball against a clean build from the repository is a standard audit step in a way it wasn't before, and reproducible builds went from a niche enthusiasm to an obvious priority. Second, the attack surface included a person's health. The technical work was excellent, but the entry point was a burned-out volunteer being pressured by fake accounts into accepting help. You cannot patch that with tooling. It's a resourcing problem. Critical infrastructure maintained by unpaid individuals with no institutional support, and it's been discussed for years without being solved. Third, and the one I find hardest, the detection was not the security system working. It was luck, resting on an unusual person in an unusual situation with an unusual memory for an unrelated error message. The honest question isn't how did we catch it? It's how many of these would we catch if they didn't have a performance bug? Because that's the only reason this one surfaced. The attacker built something that defeated code review, fuzzing, sandboxing, and the trust model, and then lost to half a second of latency that a bored engineer happened to be in a position to notice. Make the backdoor a little faster, and there is no story here at all.